You know that argument, the one you have with your friends about whether that new blockbuster movie was genius or a total train wreck. Or maybe it's about a song that's topping the charts that you think is just terrible. We all have these debates, right? And they almost always end in a stalemate.
So let's really get into it. You look at a piece of art, you listen to a song, and you have this immediate gut reaction. But where does that feeling even come from? And here's the big question. Can your gut reaction actually be wrong?
You see, this is the paradox we all live with. On one hand, we all say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Taste is personal, end of story. But on the other hand, we act as if some opinions are just better. I mean, come on, you wouldn't say that someone who thinks a kid's crown scribble is better than a Rembrandt is just expressing a valid opinion, would you?
Well, it turns out we're not the first people to wrestle with this. Way back in the 18th century, this brilliant Scottish philosopher, David Hume, he looked at this exact contradiction and he tried to figure it out. He wanted to build a bridge between these two ideas, and honestly, what he came up with is still incredibly relevant today.
So, let's start where he did, with what he called the paradox of taste. How can our feelings about art be so deeply personal, so subjective, but at the same time, we feel like there should be some kind of universal standard?
Okay, first a quick but really important vocabulary check. When Hume uses the word sentiment, he doesn't just mean opinion like we do today. For him, a sentiment was a feeling, a raw emotion, something you feel on the inside. This is absolutely key to getting his whole argument.
And that leads us to Hume's first and pretty radical point. He said that beauty doesn't exist out there in the painting or the song. It's not a property of the object, like its size or its color. Nope. For Hume, beauty is the feeling of pleasure that happens inside of you when you experience it. And Hume had this really beautiful way of putting it. He said, our minds have a productive faculty that basically projects our feelings onto the world, gilding or staining all natural objects with the colors, borrowed from internal sentiment. We're the ones adding the color.
But hold on, if beauty is just a personal feeling, doesn't that just throw us right back to square one? Does it mean that every single opinion is just as good as any other? That my feeling about a movie is just as valid as a professional critic's? Well, this is where Hume throws a really fascinating curveball.
He says, yeah, taste is a feeling. But, and this is a huge but, not all feelings are created equal. He actually believed we could find a standard to judge these feelings, and this is where his whole idea gets really, really interesting.
See, Hume's big point is this. Our feelings about art aren't totally random. They're rooted in our shared human nature. It's kind of like how our sense of taste works. In general, we're all built to find sugar sweet and rotten food disgusting. Hume thought our minds are similarly built to find certain patterns, forms, and ideas pleasing.
And this led him to distinguish between what he called vulgar taste and refined taste. Vulgar taste is, kind of basic. It's inconsistent, it's easily pleased, and it only picks up on the most obvious stuff. Refined taste, on the other hand, is stable, consistent, and it can perceive all the subtle little details that make a work of art truly great.
Okay, so if we're going to find a reliable standard for what's good, what is it? Is it like a checklist, a bunch of rules that say all great art must have this, this, and this? Hume says absolutely not. The standard isn't a list of rules for the art, it's a type of person. And this brings us right to the heart of his solution, the idea of the true critic. For David Hume, the standard of taste isn't a thing, it's a person. It's embodied in the judgment of a very specific kind of person.
To explain this, Hume tells this great story from the book Don Quixote. Two Sancho's relatives who are expert wine tasters try some wine from a big cask. One says, I taste a little hint of leather. The other says, I'm getting a faint taste of iron. Everyone else just laughs at them. But then, when the cask is finally empty, guess what they find at the bottom? An old key with a leather strap tied to it.
So, what's the point of that story? Well, it's pretty clear. A true critic, like those wine tasters, has a sense that is so refined, so delicate, that they can actually detect the tiny, specific elements that are creating the overall effect, things that the average person, with their vulgar taste, would completely miss.
So what does it actually take to become one of these true critics? Well, Hume lays out 5 specific qualities. You start with a strong sense and a delicate sentiment. Basically, your senses are sharp enough to pick up on all those little details. But that's just the raw talent. You then have to sharpen those senses through tons of practice. Then you have to perfect your judgment through comparison, looking at and experiencing all kinds of art. And finally, and this is the hardest one, you have to be cleared of all prejudice.
Now, what on earth does he mean by cleared of all prejudice?
It means putting aside your personal baggage. It means forgetting that you know the artist or that you're from a certain place and time. It means trying to judge the work from what Hume called a steady and general point of view. Basically, looking at the work on its own terms and for the audience it was actually made for.
All right, so what's the big takeaway here? Why should we care about what some philosopher in a powdered wig thought about art 250 years ago? Because Hume completely reframes how we think about taste. It's not just some random opinion you have, it's a skill that you can develop.
So here's what it all boils down to. First, appreciating art isn't just a passive thing. It's an active skill you can learn. That also means your taste isn't set in stone. You can actually cultivate it and improve it over your lifetime. And really, the goal isn't about being right in an argument. It's about training yourself to have a richer, deeper, more informed experience with art. In a way, we can all strive to be a little more like Hume's true critics.
And that brings us all the way back to the beginning, back to that argument with your friends over a movie. What Hume's idea shows us is that this argument isn't pointless at all. In fact, it's actually how it's done. That whole process of debating, comparing notes, and defending our feelings, that's how we practice. That's how we refine our own taste.
So I'll leave you with this to chew on. In our world today, with algorithms on Spotify and Netflix shaping what we see, with AI creating art out of thin air, and with cultural trends that last for about 15 seconds on TikTok, what does a true critic even look like? What would David Hume have to say about the standard of taste now?